Hello, everyone, and welcome back to From Pain Point to On Point. I'm your host, Britt, and we're coming to you live from my parents' backyard on Staten Island. I don't know if we've ever actually filmed a podcast episode on Staten Island before, but felt like it was time. If I sound funny, I apologize. I am getting over some allergies. Allergy season in New York has been crazy. That's not going to stop us from talking about our favorite thing ever, which is sales and sales teams and sales philosophy and gamification and motivation. We're going to talk about all of those fun things today, all of our favorite topics. We're going to be talking about seeing signals too late and what it means to be a reactive manager and how that's really difficult. Yeah, so let's just jump right in. Uh, so ultimately, when we think about managing a team, you can imagine whether you are a sales leader currently or if you are a rep that you're typically sitting down and you're having a meeting, whether it's a one-on-one or it's a forecast call or it's a pipeline review or it could just be a regular team meeting. And those conversations usually start off with the numbers. They're typically looking at your numbers. You're trying to figure out what's going on. You're trying to figure out what happened, where things kind of fell off, how you can recover. And on the surface, that feels like you're doing something, right? You feel proactive. You're in the details. People are being held accountable, trying to move things forward. But if you take a step back from that, there's something a little bit off about it because most of the time you're spending that time in that meeting talking about something that's already happened. And that's what we're going to talk about today. It's stuff that we at Sales Screen see all the time. It's leaders who are deeply involved in performance, but always feel like they're a step behind it. This is something that we see a lot. It's a rhythm that a lot of teams fall into. And once you see it, it's hard to unsee it. Every week, you sit down with the team, you walk through the same flow, you look at the results, you talk through what went well, what didn't, and then you try to come up with a plan to fix it. And none of that is wrong, by the way. Those conversations, they matter. But they do have that one thing in common, which is that they're happening after the fact. By the time you're talking about the deal that's stalled or the pipeline that's late or the activity that's dropped off, those things have already happened and you're reacting to them. You're not shaping them. So even though it does feel like you're leading performance, what's really happening is you're walking through a replay of what happened. It's like a weekly autopsy or a weekly postmortem. And then the next week comes around and you do the same thing. And the part that usually clicks for people is that at some point you realize you're spending more time explaining performance than actually influencing performance. So you're helping teams understand what happened. You're giving context. You're identifying gaps. You're coaching them through it, but the conversation is anchored in the past. And when that's the case, there's only so much that you can actually change. Obviously, you can learn from your mistakes, but sometimes it's not about learning from your mistakes. Sometimes it's just about doing more. Sometimes it's about being innovative or being creative or exploring new options. And that's where leadership can really feel frustrating because you're not doing anything wrong. It's just you're working with information that's showing up too late for you to actually be useful to guide the team. And this, I think, is something where leaders can be a little hard on themselves. They assume that this is a coaching problem or a consistency problem, or even a team problem, even an individual rep problem. But more often than that, it's none of those things. It's a measurement problem. If the only things that you really have visibility into are outcomes, revenue, closed deals, pipeline value, then naturally every conversation is going to start there. And those are important metrics. They're the most important metrics, arguably. They're just not early enough. They're outcomes. They're telling you how the story ends. They're not telling you how the story unfolds. So what you end up doing is leading with a scoreboard, and what you actually need is a play-by-play. And if you put yourself in your rep's shoes for a second, it becomes pretty obvious because I think that every person that goes to work, no matter what you do, whether you're a salesperson or anything else, you want to do a good job, you want to work hard, and you're pretty aware of where you're at, right? If you're behind, you know you're behind, and you don't need somebody to walk you through that. But what they're really looking for is clarity. Where should I be focusing right now? What's actually going to move the needle this week? Am I on track before it's too late to fix it? And that is the gap. Because when leadership conversations are built all around results, they tend to turn into explanations. But when they're built around signals, that turns into direction. And those are two very different things. So when you start looking at performance through that lens, focusing on the signals that lead to results instead of just the results themselves, your conversations naturally start to shift. Instead of sitting down and trying to unpack why something didn't happen, you're catching things as they're drifting. Maybe activity dips a bit earlier in the week. Maybe conversion rates start to slip. Maybe someone's momentum just feels off. Those are things you can actually do something about in the moment. So your one-on-ones can start to feel different. They're feeling less about recovering something that's been lost and more about adjusting what's happening right now. And that changes the tone of those conversations as well. There's less pressure around you missed this and more focus on here's how we get you back on track. It becomes more collaborative. It becomes more forward-looking. And over time, that's what starts to create more consistency on your team. And it's not because you're pushing things harder, it's because you're catching things earlier. And this is another thing too that I think really fuels a very positive and motivated sales culture as well, because we hear a lot from sales leaders how difficult it is to build a culture and to build a positive culture. And, part of that is, hybrid working, not being in the office, not having team camaraderie on a floor. But a lot of that really comes down to the feeling that you've done something wrong or that you've messed something up and not feeling like you have the ability to change it. Just kind of go back and do it better next time. But if you don't know what you did wrong because you made your calls or you tried to book your meetings or you tried to do your outbound, whatever it was, then it just that's not helpful to you, right? That's not helpful to a rep. It's not helpful to your team. And this is what it all really comes down to. There's a difference between looking at performance through outcomes versus looking at it through behaviors. Outcomes are telling you where you landed. Behaviors are telling you where you're going. And if you want to influence performance, you have to spend more time in that second category because that's where change is still possible. So if there's one thing that you can take away from this conversation, it's this. If most of your leadership conversations are starting with results, you're probably spending a little bit more time in the past than you realize. And again, that's not a failure on your part. It's typically not a failure on leadership's part. It's just a signal that the way that performance is being measured isn't giving you what you need early enough. So going into your next one-on-one or your next team call, start shifting the starting point. Instead of asking what happened, ask what's happening. Instead of focusing on the outcomes, look for the signals behind it, because that's where leadership can really start to make an impact. And of course, I would be remiss if I did not plug the fact that SalesScreen helps sales leaders do this every day in an automated way with our own built-in AI in our platform. But you do not need SalesScreen to do this. You do this all on your own with the platforms that you're using right now. SalesScreen just makes it a lot easier for you. But that's it for us today here at From Pain Point to On Point. Thank you so much for joining us. If this conversation felt familiar, you're definitely not alone. A lot of teams operate this way without even realizing it. But once you start to see the difference between reacting to performance and actually shaping it, it's really hard to go back. Thanks so much, guys.